I have a feeling that you are far more credible than you think. Now, at the same time, I have a funny feeling that you might be engaging in some behaviors that are undermining your credibility. Now, the thing is, you probably don't notice. And that's the problem. You don't notice, but everybody else notices. And it's not the big things, it's the little things. This channel is for women who are capable, who are already doing the work, but they don't feel like they're seen or heard or taken seriously enough as they deserve. And so we really close the gap conversation by conversation. All right, there are 5 small behaviors. They're not grandiose, they're not dramatic, but 5 behaviors that so often we engage in that actually undermine our credibility. The first has to do with our emotions. When other people look at us and believe that it's emotions and not judgment that's driving our behavior, we begin to lose credibility. Think of some of the examples. For instance, maybe you've done this. Or maybe you've received one of these emails, but somebody's angry. Somebody is frustrated and they go to the keyboard and they are typing away. And then they hit send and poof, there's an email in somebody's inbox. Maybe your bosses, maybe your colleagues, maybe your friends. And it's an email that does not send a good message. It's an email that immediately begins to undermine your credibility. And people begin to wonder, can they trust you? Because you couldn't control yourself, or we can't control ourselves enough to pause before we send the email and really consider the words, the messaging, the emotions that are going into that email and then are being delivered in someone else's inbox. Correcting somebody in public or reprimanding somebody in public, I guess sometimes people feel more confident doing that, but I gotta tell you, it makes people really distrust you. It makes you look like it's all about you and not about anybody else in the room, that you have no qualms of really pointing the finger at somebody else. And when that happens, we look at that other person as something of a victim, and we look at the person who's pointing that finger publicly as the villain. And believe me, that's a great way to undermine one's credibility. Maybe you've been in the room, maybe you've done this yourself. I have to admit, I have a feeling I have, but you react before you actually know the facts, right? You hear part of a story or you read something and you just read maybe it's just a quick headline and you react. You don't respond, but you are reacting. Firecrackers galore. It undermines your credibility because, again, it doesn't show good judgment. It shows that you are just responding to your immediate emotions. Composure sometimes gets a bad name because people think it means you're suppressing your feelings. You're not. It's just that you're keeping your emotions under control. When we let our emotions just fly, they become our spokesperson. And they don't send the right message. The woman who pauses, who breathes, who responds rather than reacts, she comes across as so powerful, even if she's the most passionate person in the room. Now, managing your emotions is part of it, but there's also managing the words that are coming out of your mouth. That's number 2. The fastest way to get people to really question your judgment is to react with certainty as though you know all the facts when you don't. And don't we see a lot of that in our culture today, both online and off? When we repeat a rumor that we can't verify, it puts our judgment in question. And more so, we begin to wonder, are they gossiping about me as well? Exaggerating an accomplishment may feel like it's building up your confidence, but people who are actually participating in the same event may have a totally different viewpoint and one that truly does not help your credibility. One of the hardest things we notice about ourselves is when we present our opinion as though it is fact. We give an opinion, but we present it not as an opinion, but as fact. This is the truth. My opinion. One of the moves I love to see, and I see it regularly, and I see it from people I truly respect, is their ability to respond to a question with, "I don't know. I'm gonna have to go do some homework on that. I don't have the answer. I'll get back to you." There's something about that, maybe courage to say, "I don't know," that builds so much trust and credibility as opposed to faking your way through it. All right, before we go further, let me just suggest that if you are wondering about your confidence, whether you are coming across as confident or whether you struggle with confidence, I've got you. Look down the description. There is a link there that will take you to the guide, my guide that I created for you, that is 7 Secrets to Confidence. I think you're going to learn a lot there. All right, we can know what to say, we can know when to say it. However, there are some actions that really chip away at credibility and immediately. And those actions are inactions. Okay, this next behavior is so important and so critical to building trust and credibility. And yet, in today's world, it is overlooked by professionals, by friends, by groups all the time, by individuals all the time. And that is not following through. You make a promise and then you don't follow through. What kind of promise? Sending an email. "I'm going to email you tomorrow." And then you don't. More so, you don't even send a communication that says, "I know I promised you an email today. I'm so sorry, but I need to follow up," or "I'm going to be out of town," or whatever it is, some kind of explanation. You've made a promise, you have made a commitment, and yet it just falls through. And in today's world, too often we see not only the commitment not being upheld, but that there's no communication regarding the fact that you have failed to make that commitment. How often do we just kind of flippantly say, "I'll call you tomorrow," and then we never do? We never make that phone call. Okay, sometimes I am guilty of that too. I realize that. And I'm guilty of some of these things. Let's bring it to mind and let's pay attention to it, because credibility and trust are critical not only to professional relationships, but to personal relationships. Unfortunately, lack of dependability has become almost predictable. You know that certain people are going to tell you, "I'll get you the contract tomorrow. I'll get you the information tomorrow. I'll follow up with you tomorrow." And you know from past experience that what you can trust is it's not going to happen. We all know we're not perfect. Sometimes we make a promise that we're going to email or we'll follow through or we're sending information and then we don't. Life happens sometimes and things get in the way where it's impossible to follow through. But here's what I encourage you to do. I plead for you to do this. Make an acknowledgement that there's been a failure here and apologize. Send some kind of email, phone call, something that says, "I promised to do this for you. I failed." And you can say what happened. And then say, "I am so sorry for the inconvenience." The gap between what you say you're going to do and what you actually do is the size of the trust that you are building or not building with other people. You don't have to be perfect. I don't think most of us expect perfection, but your word has to mean something, especially in today's world. There is a habit that keeps showing up, whether it's in meetings, in groups, in conversations, and it is a habit that does not serve us. And unfortunately, it's a habit that is a problem, but we never learned that as kids. Too often, we as women want to keep the peace, so we change our opinion to match the opinion in the room. I'm guilty. I've done that too. It's easy to do. We come across as nice and collaborative and thoughtful and kind. We're not necessarily any of that when we are changing our opinions because we just want to get along with everybody in the room. We tend to think we're being agreeable and thoughtful and collaborative because we agree. We change our opinions to match the prevailing opinion in the room. We just want to get along, but it certainly doesn't build trust. Agreeing with somebody who spoke last isn't necessarily diplomacy. It's actually a signal that you don't have an opinion of your own. Going quiet when others really would value your opinion, you may think comes across as humility. It doesn't. People are waiting for your opinion. They value your opinion. Constantly seeking approval before you give your opinion signals that you don't have any confidence in your opinion. You don't have to be combative. I think sometimes people think when it comes to opinions or voicing our opinions, we have to be combative or we have to be the loudest. We don't. We just have to understand we have a voice to share. A woman who holds her perspective with grace, who can say, I disagree and not flinch, is a woman who exudes power, a woman whom we respect. If this is resonating, do me a favor, please hit subscribe. That we talk about these kinds of items every week. And in fact, I would love for you in the comments to tell me what you'd like to see me discuss so we can talk about it as a community. Having a position does matter, but so does knowing when to speak. And there's a final habit, habit number 5, that sometimes can show people that we're not nearly so measured as they had hoped. In a culture that rewards speed, getting it done fast, that tendency to want to speak up immediately has never been greater. But it also can come at a great price. Feeling silence, because silence can be uncomfortable, doesn't come across as confidence. It comes across as anxiety. And the fact is, people know the difference. Interrupting, not always, but interrupting can signal that you think that your opinions are far more important than the conversation itself. Offering advice before you actually understand the entire situation. Okay, I have been guilty of that one too. Maybe you can relate. Sometimes you can think that you know the entire situation, so you speak up and offer advice. Well, it undermines people's trust in you, and it certainly undermines your credibility. Thoughtful communication carries far more weight than constant communication every single time. That pause before you speak, I think sometimes people are really nervous about slowing down and pausing and keeping their lips shut. But that pause, as we've spoken about in other episodes, is power. You will notice that so many times the powerful people in a conversation, in a room, in an organization are the people not who jump into the conversation right away, but who pause before they speak. Every single one of these 5 habits is the same thing at its core, and that is they destroy trust. They erode trust. Not dramatically, not all at once, but little by little, consistently over time, you lose your credibility and people lose their trust in you. When you correct these habits, you're not becoming louder and brasher or more aggressive. What you are becoming is more deliberate in your words and more deliberate in your behavior. It's one thing to listen to this video. It's one thing to consider these 5 habits, but the work begins when you decide that your presence is actually worth protecting. Now that you know what could cost your credibility and perhaps what is costing your credibility, you might ask this question: why don't people take me seriously? For that, take a look at this video.